Hello and welcome. My name's Ben Hales with Transform My Poker, and today I'm talking all about those little guys, the small pocket pairs. These are profitable hands. Feels good when we get dealt them, and we should be making a profit with these hands. The truth is though that a lot of players, maybe you included, are not making the most out of these hands. You could be making more money. So today I'm going to give you some tips which are going to be easily actionable, and they're going to improve your ability to make money with these specific hands. Okay, so let's begin. First up, let's define exactly what the small pocket pairs are. This should be obvious. Who says I do complicated slides? Pocket twos, pocket threes, pocket fours, and pocket fives. And you might include pocket sixes if you want. They're kind of borderline with the mid pocket pairs, but certainly these 4 or 5 hands. Okay, so we've worked out what small pocket pairs are. Now I want to think about our pre-flop behavior with our small pocket pairs. So this is aimed very much at deep stack situations. If you're playing in a tournament with small stacks where the effective stacks started to drop below, say 40 big blinds, set mining's probably not your best way of playing small pocket pairs. So remember, this is aimed at cash game situations, deep stack situations where you have enough stack depth to set mine. So what I'm trying to do here is give you a guideline for when to set mine and when to reject the preflop option. Many people set mine too liberally, and this is a really good way of making sure you are not doing that. You will only flop a set 1 in 7.5 times. That's not very often, and when you do flop a set, you're not going to make a massive pot every time. So you need to offset the investment you're making pre-flop with those numbers. And all in all, what this means is we should not be investing when we cannot make a nice big return. So aim for 15 times the pre-flop investment to be the effective stack size. So for example, if someone has 1,500 chips and you have 1,500 chips, they raise to 100, then what we would be doing is, are we going to call that 100? We'll be working out 100 is our investment pre-flop. That's how much we have to call. We multiply that by 15 to get to the effective stack size, which is 1,500. And that would be the break-even point for set mining. That's the lowest stack depth at which I would consider set mining. That's already barely profitable. If the effective stack size were 3,000 in this example, we would clearly have the right situation for set mining. The bigger the effective stack size, the lower the preflop investment, the more likely you should be to set mine. There's a couple of other points. The higher your pocket pair, the more likely you should be to be liberal with your set mining. The lower the pocket pair, if it's 15, 16 times, maybe throw away your pocket twos. The other important thing is position. So if you are in position, then I would recommend being more liberal. Whereas if you are out of position, then maybe multiply by 17, 18, 19 or 20 and judge whether to set mine based off a slightly higher number. Okay? Some general guidelines that should help you. Multiplying by 15 is quite easy once you get used to it. If you're not used to multiplying by 15, normally a good thing to do is to multiply by 10 and then add half again. Okay, so if you multiply 100 by 10, you get to 1,000. Just add another half of that, you get to 15 times. Okay. Final point on this slide, be more cautious out of position, as I was saying before, and be more cautious with weaker pairs. Okay. Few more notes on set mining. If there are more villains in the pot, great. That's a good thing. Actually, when you've got someone who's maybe raised in early position or has 3-bet and you've still got the right odds for set mining, these are good scenarios, because if they've got lots of examples of ace, ace, king, king, queen, queen in their range, these guys are going to become really easy to extract value from when you flop your set. So welcome guys with strong preflop ranges. The other thing to do is just remember that number I said before. You're only going to flop a set 1 in 7.5 times. Now when you're facing a preflop 3-bet, normally with small pocket pairs you ought to be folding. You can still use the set mining scenario to work out whether you have the right odds to call. So forget whatever you've invested so far, think about the next level of investment. How much is it? How much is it going to cost? Are there other people in the pot? Think about all the factors in the hand. If you multiply the next investment by 15 and you can still make that number of chips from your opponent, you might want to consider set mining still. Other than that, you're probably not going to make any progress post flop without hitting a set in a 3-bet pot, so you ought to be folding most of the time. You could call a 3-bet if the size of the 3-bet is really small, and in that situation the set mining scenario is going to stack up in your favor. As another note, you might be thinking, well, could I sometimes 4-bet with these hands? They're not usually the right hands to choose for 4-bet bluffing. There are usually hands that are going to make more sense, so suited aces or even suited connectors as bluffing 4-bet hands. Small pocket pairs have what we call poor equity realization. So you might have two hands of very similar overall strength in terms of equity, but a hand with high cards, has suited and connected nature, is much easier to play after the flop than a hand like pocket twos, where you're more often than not struggling with the post-flop play, especially out of position. So it's sometimes much easier to play a weaker hand than the small pocket pair and realize its equity, whereas the small pocket pairs just don't play very well in deep stack scenarios. So all of that means you ought to do a lot of folding with your small pocket pairs pre-flop facing a 3-bet. Next, I just want to make a couple of post-flop notes for you on these small pocket pairs. So first of all, and this is something people don't do enough of, get busy when you hit a set. I'm not saying you can't slow play a street. Sometimes just calling on the flop or checking the flop can be a very good play, but don't do it for 2 streets. You must get busy. Very often it makes good sense to get busy right there on the flop with a strong play. If you are going to slow play a street, don't slow play 2 streets. So get busy with your set. The other thing is the old phrase, no set, no bet. It's usually good advice. There are times when we can make money with our pocket pairs having not flopped the set, but be cautious. Don't go calling down willy-nilly. You can bleed chips that way. Pick your moments. Normally, just check and fold. You don't want to be progressing too far with these hands unless you have a really good post-flop plan. In position, you might be able to win a few more pots without hitting a set, but out of position, checking and folding is nearly always going to be the right strategy. Okay, on the final slide, I just want to make a few observations about how to play small pocket pairs at short stack depths. Again, I see a lot of mistakes being made with these hands at short stack depths, so here are a few pointers. The small pocket pairs are reasonably good for shoving at less than 12 big blinds. You don't need to open raise them, you don't need to limp with them, you don't need to just fold them. If you're first in, you're first to make a sizable bet, just shove them. That's going to be the best way to play these hands. Sometimes you'll get called by a bigger hand, but overall you should make a small amount of profit by shoving these hands pretty much from any position. Under the gun +1 might be slightly tricky, but generally you can push all in. If you're responding to a raise or a shove, be more cautious. They will very often be best played with a fold, and occasionally, if your opponent is super wide, you might decide you are able to call. If you've got a few more chips, say up to 16 big blinds, you can still shove them most of the time if you're the first person to get a raise in. You don't need to worry about min raising, folding to a re-raise. That's probably suboptimal. So if you've got less than 16 big blinds, you should consider the open shove rather than a small raise and then respond to your opponents. This is tricky, and under the gun and under the gun +1, you can also fold these hands. Certainly 2s and 3s are particularly difficult. So folding them under the gun is okay at 12 to 16 big blinds. All right. 3-bet shoving, much more difficult. I'm not going to go into that in this video. So if you're wondering what to do with small pocket pairs in 3-bet shove situations, highly recommend Hold'em Resources Calculator as a tool to help you with those decisions. I hope you've enjoyed this video. I hope you've taken some of those tips on board and that your play now with small pocket pairs becomes more profitable. My name's Ben Hales with Transform My Poker. Please add your comments and questions down below. Thanks very much for listening.